Hi there. Welcome to the show. I'm Doug Johnson, and this is The Business of Life. Each month, our guest will highlight some strategies for success in real life. Today's guest is a wonderful person. He is an effective leader and, coincidentally, teaches all about leadership. He is an author, a speaker, a coach, and a trainer. So I'd like you all to welcome my friend, Demetrius Hammett. D, welcome.
Thank you, Doug, and I'm glad to be here.
Well, we really appreciate your being here. Let's talk a little bit about leadership. Now, you and I only go back a short time, but I feel like we've known one another for a long time.
Absolutely.
And we've discussed our various enterprises in leadership and management. So, really, what is leadership? What's your definition of leadership?
Well, leadership is something, first of all, that many believe is truly about leading other people, leading organizations, doing the right things for the right reason, for the right purpose.
Okay.
Leadership, however, is so misunderstood that it's one of the most misunderstood phenomenons of our day.
Okay.
One of the reasons why that's the case is because everybody has their different definition of what leadership truly is. Mm-hmm. However, I believe that leadership is a practice. Just like a doctor or a lawyer practice their skill, leaders practice leadership.
Well, now we always think of leadership being involved with a business. Is there leadership on the personal side of the equation also?
Absolutely. In fact, leadership in business is just the beginning.
Okay.
Leadership in our personal lives is just as important, if not more important than in business.
Okay. How do you define leadership in the personal arena?
Well, you really want to start with the self.
Okay.
Start with the self. Understand that if you are going to be a leader, you're going to start with yourself and at home.
Okay.
If you are a husband, you have a family to lead. If you are a wife, you have a family to lead, because in most cases, unfortunately today, you have single parents, single mothers,
Right.
who really are charged with the responsibility of leading their household if the husband is not there. So leadership starts at home. And when you think about what leadership is truly, leadership is understanding the various competencies that make up leadership, or the capabilities that are there that leaders need to practice on a daily basis. And again, practice means simply this: you won't get it right all the time.
Okay, interesting.
In fact, you'll probably get it wrong more than you get it right.
So we can still be a good leader even though we don't get it right all the time.
Absolutely. I call it a practice.
Okay. What are some of the other competencies involved in personal leadership?
Personal leadership, one of the big competencies that I think about is modeling.
Okay.
Good leaders model the behaviors that they would like to see in others. When you think about not only modeling, but when you think about caring, good leaders care about those they lead. We've heard a lot of information on emotional intelligence.
Right.
And emotional intelligence is really understanding the various emotions that drive us as humans, as people. Leadership is important in that regard as well, in that leaders care about those they lead, because typically when you care about others, they tend to care back.
Makes sense.
Leadership is really truly about caring and really understanding that other people out there are just as important as we ourselves are, or more important sometimes, depending on the situation, than we are when it comes to specific situations. For instance, when you're leading others in the workplace, especially, and I'll use an example of a company that rely on others to manufacture or build widgets.
Okay.
Well, you can't do it all by yourself. You need other people to do that, to work with you. So that's why leadership is important, because in order to get those jobs done, you have to get them done through other people that want to be there, other people that want to do a good job. And typically, unfortunately, some leaders have the mindset that people really truly don't want to do a good job, when the fact is they really do want to do a good job. Sometimes the leader themselves, they're in the way of people doing a great job.
You know, Dee, one of the things that you said that just caught my interest, you used the phrase working with as opposed to people working for. And I thought that was very telling. Because don't you think that a leader does work with, and when you use the word with, that creates a dialogue or a team, as opposed to working for, which is a subordinate and is more of a monologue rather than a dialogue?
Absolutely. In fact, years ago, I worked for a major tire and rubber company. I can recall the role that I had at the time. I was a district manager. I can recall being out with one of my managers after a meeting. I went out to take a look at the new area that I was charged with leading. And he introduced me to some of his associates, some friends of his. And he said to them, "Let me introduce you to my boss." And so the introductions were made. After that, I said to the manager, "Hey, in the future, just let other folks know that I'm an associate that works with you." Because I went on to explain to him, that's exactly what we are. I'm here to support you. One of the things that I believe in leadership is that we're there to serve those that we lead. In my book, I talk about servant leadership in a little more detail.
Okay.
I talk about the fact that, see, servant leadership is truly just that, serving those that we lead, that we're charged with leading. And how do we do that? Well, we do that by making sure that those that we lead have what they need in order to be successful. The first thing that we want to make sure, though, is that they understand what's expected of them. Outlining what the expectations are and ensuring that they understand those expectations.
So really, you can't get there if you don't know where you're going.
Absolutely.
So set those expectations.
Absolutely. But getting back to what we had just talked about, which is making sure that people understand that you're in this together, that you're in it together, and that you're there to support them. Well, again, they will do the same for you. They will let you know that they're there to support you just as much.
So in real life, this works not only from the company that we talked about, and we talked about family a little bit, but it also works in community and church, neighborhood, that kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Because again, going back to the leadership characteristics that I often talk about, such as modeling the way, being that caring leader, helping others to understand that leadership starts with them or starts from the self. Those competencies or leadership capabilities and characteristics really can be used at home or in other areas of our lives. It's not just in business. They can be used in schools, or those characteristics can be used in schools, in institutions, in business, just in our lives, period.
You know, I was looking at your website, and one of the things I noticed was some discussion about in both your mission and your vision statement, referring to respect, trust, and ethics. Mm-hmm. What part do those play in leadership?
They're key ingredients of leadership. When you think about respect, as a trainer, when we talk with associates in various organizations or institutions, I ask them, what is some of the things that you look for? What's one of the most important things that you look for mm-hmm. from those that lead or from your managers within your organization? And the number one thing that they look for is respect. Respect me. So when you think about that, is respect hard to give? It really isn't. When we talk about trust is important from this regard. Simply do what you say you're going to do.
And how simple is that?
Absolutely. But some of us make it very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is something that many of us believe that you need to earn. However, I say give trust. Start your relationship off with trust. One of the things that I will often do when I start a relationship, especially if it's a business relationship, I will tell the person that our relationship is like a blank sheet of paper.
Mm-hmm.
No one can mark that paper or mar that paper but that individual. So that's trust. That's giving trust. And so what I try to do is really take leadership to a level so that even your children, young children, can understand what it truly means to be a leader. And talking about some of the things about leadership, or some leadership topics that they can truly understand. As we often talked about, you and I, mm-hmm. and that is, we've worked in the school systems.
Right.
And we've worked with young people. And young people really truly look at us to see if we're modeling the behaviors that we expect from them. I talked with one of my son's friends very recently,
mm-hmm.
and I asked him what did he think about some of the leaders that he know on a personal level. And he said that some of the leaders that he liked, he thought, and I thought this was very, very beautiful, he said that the number one leader that he respects was his dad.
Okay.
Because his dad really, really knows how to communicate with him and to get at his level. And there was another person that he thought that was a good leader,
mm-hmm.
but found it challenging to relate to younger people.
Okay.
And so I thought that was very important because really not so much of what he said, but the fact we were having a conversation right. and how he said it. So he really does, young people really do pay attention to what we do as adults, to what we say, and most importantly, what we do. So that's important.
So that really bumps up all of our responsibilities as older people, not that old, but mm-hmm. older people, for the younger generations. And it goes back to, you're talking about being a role model. Model the appropriate behavior, and really we're going to be helping the younger generations become successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that we have to remember too, and leadership, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult. And I did talk about that just a little bit ago, about the fact that understand that it's a practice, understand that you won't get it right. So what do? Do you not try? If you fail, do you stay stuck? No. You recognize that you were not successful with this particular area. So, or this particular area of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So what do? Well, here's what you do. You try it again.
So kind of like the little train that could.
Absolutely.
You just keep on keeping on.
You keep on keeping on. You keep on working at it. You understand that, again, it's a practice. You won't get it right all of the time, but that, like with any practice, you got to do just that. Continue to hone your skill. Continue to get better at communicating. That's another leader characteristic. What I like to call the competency is effective communication.
Okay.
Whose responsibility is it to effectively communicate? Well, it's the leader's responsibility. And since leadership, it's everybody's business, then to effectively communicate, it's everybody's responsibility. If you know that you have a weakness, or you're not as effective with your style of communication or communicating, period, then get better. There are tons of books and information on how to communicate or how to effectively communicate. One piece of advice that I'll give, and that is, if you truly want to communicate effectively with your spouse, with an associate, you need to find out, how does that person like to be communicated to or with? And the one thing you can do is just simply ask them.
Interesting.
Just ask.
Now, you've written a book. Are all of these tips in your book?
Yes,
or tell us about the book, actually.
Yes. Well, the book is called The Challenge of Leadership. Are you up for it? And the reason why I came up with that title, because, see, we all believe or want to believe that we're a leader. You can ask anybody, especially those of us that lead others in business or at home or in our other institutions, whether it be our place of worship or in government or whatever. If you were to ask that individual, are you a good leader? They're going to say yes. But are they the person to tell you yes or no?
Probably not.
No. You want to ask those that they're leading. Perhaps if you're a husband, just simply ask the wife or the children. If you are a leader at work, do an assessment on your leadership with those that you're leading. But you have to have strong and big shoulders, because the assessment may come back that you are not the leader you think you are. So, the one thing that I constantly recommend is do a self-assessment first. Do a self-assessment. Be honest with yourself. Then go out to others and assess what they think about your leadership. Once you understand and recognize where there are some gaps, then you want to make sure that you're focusing on those gaps. So again, is leadership a challenge? Yes, it is. The question that I have also as a part of that title is, are you up for it? Are you up for the disappointment when you get that assessment back? Are you up for the hard work that it takes to be a good leader? Are you up for sitting in that chair of leadership that brings along with it a lot of responsibility that you may be too tired, either physically or mentally, to take on?
Is it okay, Dee, for some people who say they are not ready? Is that an okay answer?
Absolutely. In fact, I talk about this in my book with this very subject, and I even talk about some of the leaders that we know of today. For instance, I'll talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. It was not his choice to become or to be that civil rights leader that we all know him for. It was others who saw that he had great leadership capability, and it was a group of men who recommended him for the role that he did not want to take on because he thought that he wasn't good enough. But he saw the bigger picture. He saw the challenge. He saw the vision. And so he bought into the vision the vision became his. And we know the rest of the story.
And I think, Dee, that probably is very important with any leader. If you know the vision and you buy into it, regardless of whether it's business or personal, it works. It propels you towards that destination of being a good leader.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's having a vision is so important because it gives us a goal. It gives us something to look forward to. Even in the scriptures tell us that people without a vision will perish. Now, the greatest author of all time just told us that a vision is important. How much so more, or how much so should we follow that advice of having a vision that others can truly buy into, and most importantly, can link to, just like in the case with Dr. King, who saw a vision, who was inspired by that vision, and decided to link his cause or become a part of that cause in order to make things better for himself? No, not hardly, but for millions of other people, to make sure that they too can become successful in their personal lives, in business, in education, in so many other areas of life. That's something that he bought into, that's something that he saw, and that was important to him. And there are many other leaders. In fact, when I do trainings on leadership, I often ask my participants to think about leaders that they know and to exclude leaders perhaps that we've read about or heard about. I try to encourage them to think of leaders perhaps in their community, in their home, people that they personally know, and then but to identify some of the characteristics that they see in those individuals and why they conclude that this person is a leader. It's important to understand that.
Interesting. Dee, one of the things that you shared with me were 3 one-sentence strategies for success. So what you said is care about those that you lead. Others are just as important as we are, and leadership is everybody's business. Can you enlarge on those a little bit and tell us a little more about those?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, leaders need to care about those that they lead. And the best way that I can explain that to you is to tell you a very, very quick story about a gentleman that I used to work for as a young man. I worked in a retail environment, and I was always very jovial, very happy-go-lucky, if you will. One day I came into the store, and I wasn't the normal guy, the normal happy-go-lucky, jovial guy. And the manager asked if I would go change the marquee outside. So I said, sure. So I went back to the box where we kept all of the lettering. I stooped down and started to take out the letters that I needed. And this manager startled me because he came and he stooped right next to me and he looked at me and he said to me, "Are you okay?" And I looked back, a little shocked that he was there. And I said, yeah, why? He said, because I don't see this. I don't see the smile. And then he pat me on the shoulder and said, "You need to keep that up. We need that around here." And I thought, now see, that guy, I like that guy.
Good leader.
I'll do anything for that guy because he made me feel good. And you better believe that when I stood up and completed my job and proceeded with my job, I was smiling again because of that leader caring about me because of what he did, not because of what he said.
And really, it was nothing extraordinary, nothing costly. It was a simple communication.
Absolutely. Didn't get a raise. He didn't pay anything for that
But
or
that
pay me anything.
pat on the back was more important.
Absolutely. Knowing that that manager whose name, by the way, is Doug, that Doug cared about me. Mm-hmm. That was important to me. And to this day, we're friends. That was almost 30 years ago. The other thing that I talk about is understanding that others are just as important. Mm-hmm. And we learn as a child that we should treat others with kindness and respect. Treat others as you would like to be treated. There's some that even take it to a whole nother level. Treat others like they expect to be treated. If we like to be treated with kindness, perhaps the other person may want to be treated with tender kindness. So we want to make sure that we understand how other people want to be treated. Mm-hmm. And at the worst case scenario, treat others how you expect to be treated. And then the other thing that we talk about, or that I've talked about, is leadership being everybody's business. Don't wait to show your leadership capability. Be the first to show honor. Be the first to show leadership. Be the first to show others that you care. If you can remember those 3 tips, again, care about those that you lead, understand that others are just as important as you are, and leadership is everybody's business. If we could just start practicing those 3 things, we will be so far ahead of the game, so far ahead in terms of perfecting our leadership practice, that we will do good, not only in business, but in our home lives too, and especially with those that we lead immediately on the front end, which is our family.
Dee, some great tips, and I'm sure our audience can put these into play right away. Dee, thanks so much for being here today.
Well,
it was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Doug. I appreciate it.
So here's something that bothers me when I'm eating out in a restaurant. Let's say it doesn't bother me. Let's say it's one of my pet peeves. Hi, I'm Doug, and I'm going to take care of you this evening. Now, before the eyes start to roll, think about it. I'm fine with that if the person is sincere. But if they're doing it by rote and they're doing it so quickly that obviously I can't get their name, I have an issue with that. Restaurant managers should think about this and in their training talk about being sincere, because I can always take my business elsewhere.